Primer, Episode 2, Places, People, and Cultures of Essos and the Other Continents, Part 2, an overview of the 9 free cities. The western end of Essos is home to the 9 free cities. These cities are the ones that interact the most with the people from Westeros. But who lives in these free cities? What are the free cities like? And come to think of it, what are the 9 free cities? But what are they even? Let's answer that last question first, because it's the easiest one to answer. The 9 free cities are Braavos, Lorath, Norvos, Qohor, Pentos, Tyrosh, Myr, Lys, and Volantis. I'm going to take you on a journey through each of these cities one by one. But let's start by saying that the term city is misleading. To be honest, these 9 cities are more like city-states, which are basically small kingdoms. They have one major city and a bunch of villages and towns around this city that feed it and supply natural resources like lumber or metal. I realize I just showed you a picture of a Greek city-state, but in the real world, these cities would have been more like the city-states of Italy in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. So places like Florence, Milan, and Venice, which had their own nobility that were sometimes called doges, or the Italian equivalent of a duke, and they conducted their own affairs without a king to rule over them or to control them. The only real authority that they answered to was the Catholic Church, which was headquartered in Rome. That's what the 9 free cities of Essos are like, politically speaking. It's important to note that all the free cities were at one time colonies of the Valyrian Freehold during the height of its supremacy over this part of the continent. Well, all except Braavos, which was founded by escaped slaves running away from their Valyrian masters. So, I guess that's Valyrian adjacent or something. Following our comparison of the free cities to the Italian city-states, Valyria would have functioned in much the same way that the Catholic Church in Rome functioned. And even though the freehold no longer exists, its influence over these 9 cities has shaped their history and in some ways shaped the culture of each city, despite their vast differences between each other and the freehold itself. A major example of the influence of Valyria over the free cities is the fact that each city speaks their own version or dialect of bastardized High Valyrian, which is the language that was spoken in the freehold. Many people in the free cities also speak the language that people in Westeros speak, which is called Common. That's because there's a lot of trade back and forth between the free cities and Westeros. Originally, most of the lands these cities now inhabit used to be the homelands of the Andal and Rhoynar peoples. The Andals and the Rhoynar had been systematically conquered by the Valyrians, and many of the conquered were then turned into slaves. Either that or killed. Those who managed to escape the crushing might of the Valyrian Freehold migrated to Westeros. So if these 9 cities are Valyrian colonies anyway, what makes them free? Why are they called free cities? Well, despite the fact that they were almost all under the control of Valyria, well, except Braavos, they actually internally handled their own affairs without direct oversight from the Dragon Lords. And as you'll soon see, many of these cities were started because people from within the Valyrian Freehold objected to the way business was handled in their hometown and broke away to form their own loosely affiliated cities. And why do you suppose these groups of people left Valyria to form their own cities? The answer is because they were super religious, and the Freehold of Valyria was a secular, pluralistic society where most of the people in charge were atheists. Yes, you heard me correctly. The Valyrians officially did not have any gods. Oh, and side note, when diverse people are allowed to follow many different philosophies and practice different cultural rites in one society altogether, that's called pluralism. I mean, there is more to it than just that, but that's the basic gist of cultural pluralism. And I can hear some of you book nerds yelling at me now, "But Kier, the books talk about how some of the Targaryen dragons were named after Valyrian gods, so the Valyrians couldn't have been atheists, dum-dum." Well, sorry you guys. The World of Ice and Fire says that the official stance of the Valyrian Freehold was that religion was a crutch and that there were no true gods. But you can't dictate what people believe. Maybe some of the people who ruled over the Freehold felt like gods themselves, given that they wielded magic and had dragons, so that's probably why they didn't think any of the gods were real. But according to the history book, most of the regular everyday people living in the Freehold seem to have had religious affiliations of some kind. If you have enough people who believe what you do and you're all really hardcore into your faith, and you don't even want to associate with people who don't believe the same thing that you do, then you can afford to move or to build a new city for all the people who subscribe to your religion, which is the case for many people who leave Valyria to live in cities like Lorath or Norvos or Qohor. And to address the question of the Targaryen dragons having the names of Valyrian gods, okay, I'm going to venture a guess that the Targaryens were far more into prophecy and religion that they'd led on, and perhaps more than the other dragon lords. There are clues to this being the case and hints that they were pretty superstitious and religious, and you'll see that as we explore Westeros and the history of the Targaryen dynasty. But for starters, the first Targaryens to move away from Valyria moved away because one of them had a prophetic dream that predicted the doom of Valyria 12 years before it happened. And you get the impression that when they left, they took at least one 5,000-year-old scroll with a prophecy about a prince that was promised with them to Westeros. Also, their house words were blood and fire, and those two things just happened to be the main ingredients of Valyrian magic. So maybe the Targaryens were more into religion, prophecy, and magic than the other dragon lords. I mean, this isn't explicitly stated, but maybe the Targaryens thought the gods were real because they were spared from the doom. After all, none of the other 40 houses of dragon lords that ruled Valyria survived the doom. Theoretically, the Targaryens might have thought that the gods they secretly worshipped had sent them the vision to make sure that they were saved, and they decided to honor these gods by naming their dragons after them. I don't know. Like I said, it's just a guess. Anyway, since the doom of Valyria, the Free Cities are the only places in the world where you can still find people with Valyrian blood. Not to say that the Free Cities aren't racially diverse, they really are a rainbow of all races and colors because the original Valyrians enslaved people from all over the world. But Valyrians themselves were famous for having silver or light blonde hair and purple or pale blue eyes. If you want to find people with these types of features, then you need to go to the Free Cities, and consequently, a few of the Targaryen kings and princes of the past did just that, venturing out to the Free Cities in search of Valyrian-blooded brides. Side note, there are only 4 families in Westeros who are known to have Valyrian blood: the Targaryens, the Baratheons, the Velaryons, and the Celtigars. But the Targaryens and the Baratheons are almost all dead and gone from the world at this point. The only members of those families that we know for sure are still alive are Daenerys, Stannis, Shireen, and yes, Stannis and Shireen are still alive in the books, you guys, Gendry, and a few of King Robert's bastard kids that are still alive, like Maya Stone, Bella Rivers, or Edric Storm. If you don't know who Maya, Bella, and Edric are, and you're a show watcher only, then don't even worry about it. They aren't in the TV show, and they're not likely to ever show up either. Book readers will remember who they are, and you don't have to worry about it. As for the other Valyrian people, the Velaryons and the Celtigars, because they live in the Crown Lands, they were forced to join Stannis Baratheon's army at the Battle of Blackwater Bay, and most of these men died in the explosions of wildfire. So there really aren't that many people from Westerosi families that have Valyrian blood, certainly not anymore. You could probably easily fit them all in one cottage at this point. Since the Doom killed off all the dragons and the dragon riders, the people of the Free Cities don't have to pay taxes to some overlords anymore, nor do they have to follow anyone else's rules. However, on the downside, they no longer have the protection of dragons, or the wealth that comes with magic, or even the population sizes that they used to have when Valyria still existed. For about 100 years, After the doom of Valyria, this part of the world was consumed by a series of battles and wars for dominion that were called the Century of Blood. And it basically happened because the Valyrians were dead and gone, and different groups of people wanted to fill the power vacuum that they had left behind. Since each city handled these conflicts differently, we'll discuss the Century of Blood city by city, starting with Lorath.